It is January 12th. I'm Chris Chavez,
I'm Preet Majithia.
and we're back with another episode of This Week in Track and Field. We're not going to spend a ton of time recapping the 2026 World Cross Country Championships because myself, Eric, and Aisha did that on Saturday, right from the course. So if you're looking for our recap of the races that took place down in Tallahassee, you can go and find that in the previous episode to this, where we recorded it from our amazing set that we had built out by ASICS. And yeah, but I figured we would kick things off for this episode with getting your thoughts, Preet, on the broadcast side of things, which I kind of was, as I was at the race scrolling on Twitter, there were quite a bit of complaints, I felt like, from people really struggling to follow the action in this one. What was your experience watching the races?
Yeah, I think so. There's probably stepping back. There's probably a couple of things, right? I think it looked like, and from all the feedback that everyone's been giving from being on site, it was an amazing event to be
Amazing,
there
yeah.
on site for. It was a lot of fun, and it looked like it was very well organised and all of that. And I think the issue with the very fun course that you had was that there was no way to have, like we normally do on a cross country course, you normally have a bike or a buggy or something going in front of the runners to capture the action on camera. That obviously was not possible because of the obstacles, the man-made hill, the beach, the mud, all of that stuff, the water pit, and the alligators. And obviously there was no, and because of the trees, there was no space alongside the course for that for the buggy or the bike to run along either. So that made it a little bit tricky from that perspective for the camera to follow along. So all the footage we were getting to see was either from static cameras, which were placed at each of the obstacles and at the finish line, or from drone footage. And the problem with the drone footage was because of the trees, it had to go behind the runners so the drone operator could see where they were going, because if they'd been going, normally when you get drone footage of a race, the drone will go in front of the runners, and then just obviously be flying backwards. But we couldn't have that either because of the trees, because the drone would just fly straight into a tree because the drone operator wouldn't be able to see where it's going. So I don't blame them. Like, I understand the logistics of it, but the problem was that we then spent a very long time missing live sections of the race. In the relay, we were literally zoomed out overhead shots of the runners. I think the commentator, Hannah England, she couldn't even tell which teams were leading, what was going on. I think they got a bit better with that as the race went on. But even so, you were kind of missing large chunks of the race because they'd basically just be stuck on the static camera at one of the obstacles, then maybe move to the drone for a bit and then move to the next obstacle camera. But it meant you got to see more of the runners that were running behind, which is probably quite good, and often a criticism of other broadcasters. You don't get to see some of the other runners behind the front of the race. But at the same time, I think we did miss some of the action. It was hard to follow the race. It wasn't as easy. And obviously the other secondary problem was there were no live splits. The graphics, like if you compare to NCAA cross, right, where you literally had the live team results, the live kind of standings, all of that on screen, which just makes it such a much more immersive experience because you know what's going on in the race. If you can't see it on screen, which you can't because you're only going to be seeing one bit of the race at any one time, the cross country race, the joy of it was seeing how the teams were progressing throughout the race, and all of that. And we got zero information. We'd get maybe the top 5 or 10 runners at at the 1K splits, but that was about it. So it wasn't that easy to follow along.
Yeah, I did get a tweet about that from someone that was just angry, as many people are usually on Twitter. And this guy was like, "Oh, the U.S. prides itself on always having like the best broadcasts and stuff, but yet, you guys do a great job with the NCAA cross country championships, and yet you can't do it for the World Cross Country Championships of providing like live team updates and all that." And I was like, "Why are you angry at us? We have nothing to do with the broadcast." And then two, it's a World Athletics production. When we were, kind of scouting the course the previous day, we actually got to chatting with one of the camera operators who was going to be filming all of the people going over the the alligator obstacles, and he was, I think, visiting from Sweden or somewhere, and this was, World Athletics bringing their people in, whereas NCAA cross country is produced, I believe, by Carr Hughes, and they also work with, I think it's Deepan Shah's team, the camera timing and the data that they do to provide all of that stuff on screen. So different live results system and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I mean, sometimes it's not perfect when it's being done in-house. But so there was, yeah, I guess like those would be frustrating. I guess I didn't have that experience because being there on site, we had, we did see a screen, and I was thinking it was the live broadcast that would show some updates. We never really got updated live team scores, but what we were able to have is, the expertise of Kerry Tollefson and Paul Swangard, who were the PA announcers all along the course, and they lined it with speakers so that even if you were, in the back somewhere in the woods, you'd still be able to hear all of that stuff. And the other, I guess I wrote about this in the CITIUS Mag newsletter with the parting thoughts that I had from World Cross Country was that, I mean, great job by Hannah England on a tough assignment to handle all of World Cross Country by herself for the broadcast. Now, what I had heard was that, there were plans to have a second broadcaster, but then that was kind of changed in the days, I think, leading up to World Cross. And so the whole entire assignment fell on Hannah, and I got to catch up with her after the races. And yeah, she was also super familiar with the course, having run at Florida State, and it was, she did a great job. So yeah, sorry you didn't get as awesome of an experience watching from home. Maybe that's incentive to hopefully try and make it out to the 2029 edition of World Cross, which this was something we were kind of talking about toward the end of the podcast, was scratching our heads thinking, oh, like, is World Cross is the next one 2 years from now? Like, just what is the frequency of these major events? And I think I misspoke saying it would be on the same year as like the Olympic year. But it sounds like World Cross is going to be in 2029, the next edition, at least, like, for sure. Even though World Athletics decided to move it to odd number years in December of 2024. There was a press release, I believe, but in a press call just last month, Seb Coe said that they'd be skipping 2027. So this was so successful that, I mean, like, Tallahassee established itself as the cross-country capital of the world, and like, if they want to host in 2027 again, like, let them have it. And 2029, let's keep this thing there. But it was a lot of fun. And I think like one thing I harped on toward the end of our last podcast was just the crowds were incredible. Part of that had to do with the U.S. Club Cross Country Championships taking place the next day and being able to bring in all those people from across the country who are already, runners themselves and running nerds to be there and witness World Cross. So, yeah, it's a valuable asset. Now we got to use it wisely to try and draw more crowds to other running events throughout. So, yeah. Did you have any hot takes off of the race that we didn't talk about in our post-race show?
Well, I was going to say, if NC State had a team, like, they needed a fourth scorer, but they would have scored pretty high. So that was really good. Hannah Gapes, Grace Hartman, Phoebe Anderson, all ran very well, all from the Wolfpack. So that was a pretty cool little storyline that I saw. Yeah, I mean, it was obviously a tough day for some athletes, the likes of a Jimmy Gressier and stuff, not placing as high as we'd want. But yeah, I think there were a lot of fun races. I really enjoyed, once you got into it, like, I really enjoyed the races as such. And it was interesting that people like Lauren Ryan, who is, again, very familiar with the course, placed really well, worked her way through the field really well, and placed really well at the end of the race in 13th place. So I do think there's something to that, perhaps. But yeah, no, nothing too wild. I did love. I do think the 4x2K relay was amazing. I did really enjoy.
So much fun.
It was so much fun, and I think the bit that's tricky is, like, how do you fit that in? Did it, having this in January meant we got more marathoners. We got a decent turnout for the 4x2K as well. Wasn't, not every team was sent an A team, but we got a decent turnout. I think it's always going to be a struggle when it's, when you place it in, say, March. Maybe that changes that dynamic a little bit as well, because again, there's indoors, and different people doing indoors, and there's I think it is a little bit tougher. But obviously the intention of changing it to odd years is so that it doesn't clash with World Indoors. So that is part of that intention. But then there will be European Indoors and things like that. So there's all kinds of odd things that will still clash with stuff. So you can't, you're not always going to get, you're going to get runners prioritizing different things.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part, is just with a sport that spans over indoors, outdoors, marathons, that cross country can sometimes get downplayed a little bit, and it'll just never be perfect in terms of just like the scheduling. We even, I think in our group chat, we're just like, man, like for a country with so many sub 210 marathoners, like Japan really isn't good at cross country. And then we were just like, well, that's because like, was it less than 2 weeks ago, they were all doing the Hakone Ekiden. And just imagine that talent pool, competing in cross country. I'm sure they would field a much stronger team, but for them, those Ekidens mean so much more traditionally in history. It'll just never be perfect. And I did feel like there could be some momentum to take from this event to hopefully, give it some more love moving forward. And the hope is also that there were athletes who watched it and were like, yeah, I'm having FOMO and I wish I was there. I'll try and be there for the next one. So we'll see if anything changes and they decide to go with implementing a World Cross in 2027. I think it might be doubtful just because of what we would give it less than a year to plan out and find a local organizing committee to try and pull it off. So we're looking.
They did it at like 6 months off notice when they had to change the venue for Belgrade, right? Last time it was meant to be.
That's true, actually.
In Croatia,
but the turnout was terrible.
Yeah, and I mean the replacement wasn't great, but they pulled it off. So it wasn't great for spectators and stuff, but they managed to pull off the races and stuff. So, but yeah, one thing I wanted to touch on before we move on from World Cross is what happened in your race afterwards.
The community race, yeah, great question. So we ran the 4K option. There was a 2K option. And about like as soon as we wrapped the post race show, we were probably like, I wish we would have signed up for just the 2K, because we had just like an hour and a half, 2 hours of just waiting around, and we weren't really gonna do a full warm up or anything like that and try and take it seriously. There were some people who looked like they were taking it pretty seriously. That wasn't gonna be us, and so we committed to it, so we had to do it. So what ended up happening? Highlights of that race were at the start line, Eric and Mac turned to each other and decided, hey, we're going to try and at least be like the first ones to the roller coaster hill that was put on. So you got this flat straight that you just blast down at the starting line. And Eric and Mac still had wheels, but the other member of our party, Will Lear, Aisha's husband, still, I think is maybe the one like closest to his retirement. He's still obviously like working out in the Boulder community. I think last week he had a video up on his Instagram story of him doing a workout with Parker Valby. So he's fit in relation to everyone else. And you got to remember guys like Eric, Mac, Will, and Aisha, they all have just like this instinctual competitor within them, and so that can turn on with the gun going off at the start of a race. And so I think Will beat everybody in the field to the top of the hill, and then Eric and Mac followed not that far after. I think they were probably like top 5, and then from there everyone hit the brakes, and we decided to just kind of like pack up for a bit and continue on with the race. But at an easier pace. We were gassed after the hill because we all decided to go out pretty hard. And then from there, I think I started to break away a little bit. I'm not great at just like slowing myself down to run, 8:30, 9-minute pace. And so I think I was at like 6:50 pace or something like that, my marathon pace. And I heard from behind me, it was like Eric said to somebody, it was like, we can't let Chris get away. And he was I think the only one of the bunch who decided to give chase. And so it was me, Eric, and one of our friends from New Balance running together. And by the end of the first lap, I think, is when I started to feel it a bit. The heat got to me. We were on our feet a lot. I'm pulling all the excuses possible. Weren't hydrated enough. And so then I think after a bit, Eric pulled away. And Eric was the number one person for the CITIUS Mag team. And then it was like myself, Mac, and Aisha. Those were our top 4 scorers. And then Audrey ran the whole race with Paul, who was took a moment afterwards to brag that he was closing that his final I think half mile at like 6:30 pace, or maybe not the final half mile, maybe last quarter mile. So the big fellow was rolling there toward the end. And so Team CITIUS Mag, number one team. At least that's what we're telling ourselves. We're trying to track down official results and haven't been able to find anything. We're like, I think we were the top team. So yeah, that was us. All of us outfitted head to toe in Asics, and we managed to keep both of our shoes on. So those Super Blasts came home with me a little bit muddied up. All right, should we move over to Houston, which had it was a bummer for me because I was traveling as these races were going on, but I just was refreshing the live results, and I was blown away. It was another really, really fast day of racing in Houston. So it was led off by Haptem Samuel, the NCAA cross-country champion, making his road racing debut and just going out and winning the whole half marathon in 59:01, which I believe is the fastest half marathon ever run by a current or former NCAA athlete. So super impressive run by him. Did you catch, I guess, sort of like his breakaway move in this one, Preet?
I must admit, because I woke up and I didn't wake up. It was in the afternoon, but I turned it on halfway through just as the half marathon was finishing. So I actually missed most of the actual the half marathon. So I saw the end of the marathon, which was also quite fun. Definitely looked like a pretty impressive performance from Haptem. I think 8th fastest debut of all time was the stat. Yeah, so that's pretty,
a really good stat. Wow.
So that's a pretty impressive stat I saw on Twitter. Apologies, I can't remember who it was, so I can't credit them. But but very, very, very impressive debut. And yeah, some of the people ahead of him are the likes of Jacob Kiplimo, etc. So he's in good company.
We're gonna get to this, I think, later on in the episode, and we figured it would be a really fun topic. But our way too early 2028 U.S. Olympic marathon trials, men's and women's team, we could probably do just based off of like this past weekend in Houston, and we're sort of where we're at. But the important thing to note about Haptem Samuel is that he's currently, I guess, seeking U.S. citizenship, or at least like the ability to represent the United States. Maybe by 2028, like it could be a possibility. I never know with these things. Also, just because we were just always hoping that Edward Cheserek's citizenship would turn out in time for the 2020 Olympic cycle, and then it never did. And yet there have been, tons of other athletes who make allegiance switches, and sometimes it's not as fast. But if Haptem Samuel ends up being able to run for the United States in 2028, oh my heavens, like that'd be insane, because someone who does have already U.S. citizenship and made a pretty big statement this past weekend is Alex Mayer, who finished this race in 59:23, moves to number 2 on the U.S. all-time list for the half marathon. Casey Klinger not that far behind him in 59:34 for number 3 on the all-time list. And that was Casey Klinger's debut at the half marathon, despite the fact that he's already run a full marathon. So now, within the past year, we've had Connor Mance, 59:15 in Houston. Oh, no, I think 59:17, right, is what it was. 59:23, Alex Mayer. 59:34, Casey Klinger. Ryan Ford was in this race, ran 59:48. Hillary Bohr in last year was 59:55. Isai Rodriguez also joins the sub-60 club, goes 59:57 in this one. So now we're up to 9 American men who have run sub-60 on a U.S. record eligible course. And Ryan Hall, who last year we put out this mini series hyping up the American record run, is now down to number 4 on the all-time list. So the United States, yes, the half marathon is one of those things where it's always kind of tricky to find a good opportunity to race a fast one, and Houston dominates that all-time list because January, hey, why not? Like, it's a good way to start the year, and then you can go on to focus on the 10K on the track or get ready for a spring marathon. That's always why sort of like December, January will be those times to maybe seek out a fast half marathon. But I mean, really, the U.S. is making progress because, like, for a while that list was just tough to see in comparison to some other countries.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it is very impressive that we got 4 guys under 60 minutes in one race, and we've kind of more than had 5 guys in the last year, which is or 6 guys in the last year. So that's really promising sign. Obviously, it's part of the general trend of times coming down with the shoes and everything, but it's still hugely impressive because we weren't seeing it until now, and we've been waiting for that to sort of happen, and it's kind of good to see it finally kind of happening. I mean, I'm also intrigued to know if Patrick Kiprop is going to look to change his citizenship as well, because he's obviously joined the OAC Roads team in Boulder as well. So, yeah, I don't know if he's going to be also moving in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, he went to Arkansas. He's been based here in this country for a while now. So, yeah, that would be another one where it's like, okay, we are just going to be super loaded in the marathon come 2028. And then we'll talk more about it later on in the episode. There are some track stars as well that we could probably foresee making that move. So Houston absolutely delivered on the men's side. On the women's side, just as big of a performance, I think, from Taylor Roe, the U.S. half marathon champion last year, goes 106.20, moves to number 2 on the all-time list behind Wayne Colati. Wayne Colati, who had a pretty rough day out in Tallahassee, is going to give the half marathon a go next month at the Barcelona half. And I chatted with her briefly after the race when I just kind of saw her as I was going to go pick up my bib, and she had said that she like blacked out the whole entire final lap, and it makes more sense when you look at just sort of like where she was with at 8K versus where she finished. And there were some videos that I think I saw on some people's Instagram stories of just the struggle for her to get over the final alligator barriers. Like, she was, kind of losing her footing a little bit, even towards the muddy obstacles. So I'm glad that she made it out of that race safely. I think she even thanked like the USATF medical staff afterwards. But yeah, so we'll see how she rebounds in Barcelona. But for Taylor Roe, just continued great progression for her. And it looks like she just bodes well the longer the distances go. So with Alistair and Aby doing such a good job with Fiona O'Keefe's progression in the marathon, everyone will probably be eagerly awaiting to see what Taylor Roe will do someday as well. But again, I mean, if it was from one year to the next, like, we're already seeing that the Puma Elite success is carrying over from 2025 into 2026 with Alex Mayer and Taylor Roe's big runs in Houston.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think they had another great great weekend all round. I think Fiona O'Keefe was pacing the OTQ group, and they were kind of, Paddy Diva paced Zouhair Talbi, so they were out here in force this weekend, doing a lot of good work.
Then if we go and touch on the marathon, which I think sometimes in Houston, it's like even though it is the Houston Marathon and it's got like all this, it does get a huge turnout. Sometimes the half marathon seems to steal the shine because of how good the performances can be there. But over in the full distance, Zouhair Talbi, who I think ran 2:07 on this course a couple of years ago, goes out and runs 2:05:43, which puts him, that's the fourth fastest U.S. marathon performance. But here's a couple different caveats that have to get thrown out there. He is not eligible to represent the United States internationally just quite yet. He is an American citizen, and so he shows up on World Athletics' website with the American flag next to him. And by 2028, I believe it might be before that, probably by 2027, I believe, he'll be able to represent the U.S. internationally. So already consider him and factor him into the 2028 trials. He made the Olympic team and ran well for Morocco in Paris. And now 2:05:45, that's really, really good. Only the fourth U.S. sub 2:06 American in history. He negative split it 63:05 to 62:40 and won the whole race by 31 seconds. That was good.
Yeah, I mean, if you were watching that race, so Paddy Diva paced him up to 25k, and then Zouhair Talbi just took off. He was leading that thing from the front, and I think there was a group of 4 or 5 guys, and he managed to drop one by one, drop them. So it was just him and one other guy, Adana Gebre, the Ethiopian, who was with him. And he was still leading pretty much all the way. I think the Ethiopian guy tried to make a move just, briefly, but it was, maybe a mile or so, and then he was back in front, and he basically ran most of that second half of the race solo. So very impressive performance, and yeah, it was good to see.
So Paddy Diva decided not to pull a Sara Hall, who was slated to pace this race, I think through 30K, right? And then drop out, but she found herself feeling really, really good and decides to stay in it and finishes the race second overall in 2:26:26. That's 1 month after finishing second at CIM. That's sub 2:27 on 3 separate occasions since turning 42 last April. And I mean, Callie Hogger-Thackeray, someone who she trains with, ended up getting the victory in 2:24:17, taking the lead at halfway and then never looking back. What's with Callie running all these marathons? She wins Honolulu last month and now wins Houston.
I mean, I think she just loves racing, to be honest, right? Like, I think, and the funny thing is, when she's tried to build up to something, like taken the time, like had a really long build, it hasn't gone quite as well, whether that be the Olympics or Chicago, where she kind of taken, was it Chicago? I can't remember, where she DNF'd, like she's had a couple of DNFs, but when she's actually taken the time to build to something, it hasn't gone as well. Whilst when she's done these crazy turnaround events, she ran like 2 10Ks in the space of 3 days in Oslo, and then the UK trials last year. She does these crazy things, and that's when things seem to go really well. So I guess that's the reason. And I think, as I was saying when the Olympic schedule came out, that 10K marathon double for LA is looking very possible. And she's the kind of athlete who I think could pull something like that off. But yeah, she clearly wants. I mean, the one thing is she does want a fast time, and I think obviously coming back off Honolulu, etc., it's probably a bit too short to have a proper build, and so maybe running 2:20 was not on the cards. That's ultimately what she wants to do, is run sub 2:20. But yeah, she's definitely someone who loves to race.
Where would you slot her in terms of like the UK marathoning power rankings right now? Is she number one?
She is number one. However, when we come on to Valencia, that may change. That may change quite soon, given what Eilish McColgan could do if she's back to the shape that she was in about 3 years ago, which it looks like she might be. So,
Two more quick shots from Houston. Got to give some love to Rory Linkletter, who becomes the first Canadian man to break 60 minutes in the half marathon. Took 29 seconds off of Cam Levins' a Canadian record. So he ran 59:49 for seventh place. So he's also disrupting the North American all-time half marathon list. So good to see Rory there. And I think like he was calling a shot. I was reading in the comments section of that post that someone I think came up to him in Houston, maybe asked for a picture, whatever it was, and said, "Are you going to break 60 minutes?" And he like said yes. So love the confidence that Rory's got right now. And then the other really feel-good story out of Houston is that Dot McMahon qualified for her sixth U.S. Olympic marathon trials. She ran 2:36:24 at 49 years old. And so when this got dropped into the CITIUS Mag group chat, I went to look at see like who was in her first marathon trials race. And so her history, 2024 was 51st place, 2:38. 2020, I'm going in reverse. 2020, 96th place in 2:43 in Atlanta. 2016, 33rd place in 2:44 in LA. That was a really, really hot year. 2012, 9th place in 2:32 in Houston. And then 2008, she was 8th in 2:35 when they held the marathon trials in Boston. Now, who else was in that race? Joan Benoit Samuelson, the original Olympic champion in the marathon from the 84 games in Los Angeles. And Joan Benoit finished 90th in that one. So a really just sort of like fun fact that I was kind of trying to piece together was that when Dot races at the 28 trials, which we'll talk about in a little bit, she will at least like have a connection to someone in the selection race for the next Olympic team to LA will have competed with Joni, which is just, that's just I think really cool to look back. And I mean, she was in trials races with Gina Castor. It's sort of like we have a link at least to American marathoning history just through Dot. So very, very cool. Lots of love for her in that comment section, and people continuing to, get inspiration from someone defying the odds and outracing father, mother time. And also, I guess we got to give credit. I mean, Super Shoes have helped extend people's marathoning career. So I'm sure Dot is also like, oh, like I've been equipped with a little bit of a life extension as well from that. So very, very cool story there. And I hope it probably will end up getting a little bit of love, come the broadcast on NBC. And so kind of just natural transition to talk really quick to a news story that we got today, and then we'll get over to Valencia. But there had been some rumblings about the 2028 U.S. Olympic marathon trials and, who would be bidding to host that. I think I saw something that at least like 2 cities had bid for it. And then today, kind of as there was like a figure skating championship that took place in St. Louis.
So that was the other thing I was watching this weekend. So I was busy watching that this weekend, which is partly why
figure skating guy?
Well, it's like they're the 2 big Olympic sports, right? Athletics and figure skating. So no, I do enjoy watching figure skating. I must admit, the technicalities of it can be, they're a lot trickier to be all over compared to track and field. But it's a fun sport to watch. So
what's this thing that isn't there some controversy in figure skating right now where like they're allowed to skate to like actual songs with like popular songs that are out there right now, and so now people are concerned about the rights to that music being used in like the Olympic broadcasts and then all of the social clips and
Yeah,
stuff.
so that is quite a big issue. So like if you go on the US figure skating YouTube, you can watch, for example, last year's US figure skating championships, but the music is just some horrific AI music that they put over the top because they can't use the actual original music on the YouTube. Obviously, NBC, when they do the broadcast, get the rights and it's fine. And when you watch most of the figure skating competitions, which are on YouTube, certainly in the UK and in Europe and other places, like you get the music in the normal way. But yes, there is like a lot of like Alyssa Liu, who is the figure skating champion, wanted to do a Lady Gaga, use Lady Gaga for her free skate, and she was actually had to spend months recutting the whole thing because of the music rights, and so because they couldn't use certain bits and certain versions of it that they wanted to mix in, because she wanted to use some orchestral version. There's all this kind of saga going on, but essentially that is an issue for that, and because of the music rights thing, she was not then able to use it in competition until this weekend, and so she actually isn't going to be able to use it at the Olympics most likely, and she's going to go back to the one she was really successful with last year.
Wow, what a crazy story! It just sort of like it's got like a sports business nod to it. It's and then of course just sort of like the dramatics of you feel for the athletes too, of just kind of like the added stress of having to deal with all this, but then we are living in 2026 now, and so
well, yeah, I mean, figure skating is really interesting because a couple of other things, right? That obviously Russia are one of the dominant nations, so 2022 February was the Olympics, and obviously it was only a few weeks later that the war started and the Russians were banned. And what they have done for the Winter Olympics now that are coming up in a few weeks is they have allowed neutral Russian athletes to compete. They're only allowed to send one athlete per discipline, but they have to prove that they've been neutral in relation to the war. So there's this whole thing going on, which is why there's a lot of pressure on athletics and track and field in the run up to 2028, because Seb Coe and World Athletics have been one of the sort of standouts, have been pushing back against readmitting Russia into competition. So it's all there's a lot of politics going on behind the scenes around that aspect of things. And obviously we will get to see some Russian and Belarusian athletes compete at the Winter Olympics, but obviously under a neutral flag.
Yeah, and I remember just sort of, this might have been around 2019, 2020. There were a couple Russian athletes who got cleared by World Athletics to come back. This is on the heels of like the doping ban. And so that was like a whole separate can of worms, where it's sort of like, all right, if you can prove that you've been clean and you have no association to any of like these dirty coaches or the corruption and all that kind of stuff, then like we'd be able to clear you to compete. Then the war started, and I think like it was just kind of like a blanket ban over any Russian and Belarusian athletes. And so but for track, like we've kind of been, we haven't seen any of those. I do see occasionally like results from like their national championships, and as of right now, no one's really wowing the world in any of the track events. Like for a while, right, they had like the world record holder in the pole vault, and then she turned out to be like not a spy, but something tied to the Kremlin and like pretty high up, and so crazy stuff. But we're getting far away from the fact that St. Louis has submitted a bid to host the 2028 U.S. Olympic Marathon Trials. A couple weeks ago, this actually kind of seeped out there a little bit because the St. Louis Sports Commission president, Mark Schreiber, was actually like on a podcast talking about the figure skating championship that was taking place there, and then also some of the other sports that they've been trying to get to come. So they're looking to host the 2030 U.S. Figure Skating Championships, the Frozen Four from the NHL, the 2028 World Cup of Hockey, the 2031 Rugby World Cup, some future NCAA championships. But when he mentioned the marathon trials, it obviously is of great interest to people like us, because we're kind of wondering, like, what is the future of the U.S. Olympic Marathon Trials, when we've heard just sort of like the stories from Atlanta and just how much it costs to host the whole entire thing. And then Orlando was willing to take it on, but make some adjustments so that that financial undertaking wouldn't be as heavy. And so I'm not entirely sure what is part of this bid from St. Louis, but then also St. Louis does have a history with the marathon trials. They hosted in 2004 when the marathon trials were separated. The men competed somewhere else, and then the women were in St. Louis. That's one that Colleen DeRuick ended up winning and beating Dina Castor, actually. Dina, I think, kind of had a rough final 5K. And then it was, who was third in that one? It was, Jen Rhines was the third member of Team USA. And then obviously in Athens, Dina wins the bronze medal. The qualifying window for the 28 trials already open. So Houston, I believe, added 9 women into the qualifying. And then we had the list of, let me see if I could pull it up on the men's side. We had a couple new additions over on the men's side as well. 7 American men. And so the fields are growing and coming along. If we have 107, I think right now, women qualified for the 28 trials, which would be one more than the number of finishers that 2004 had. So kind of goes to show you just like the leaps and bounds that could, and we have two years left of that window being open. So it's been almost, it's been 22 years already, and look at all the progress that American women's marathoning has made. Now, I kind of made a joke on Twitter that St. Louis, the guy said, like, people have to remember St. Louis is, his quote was, St. Louis is an Olympic city and will always be an Olympic city. And I think what people have to remember is that St. Louis hosted the 1904 Olympic Games. That one was kind of a crazy one because of like the World's Fair and stuff. But I did, it was part of my research for the marathon book, and I think I have a short section on it. But that race, you got to go to the Wikipedia page for the 1904 Olympic Marathon. 90 degrees on the day. Race started at 3 p.m. 32 men started the race. Only 14 are believed to have finished. There's like, even if you go on the official Olympic website or Olympedia, which is a resource that I use, you have, I think, the times for the top 3 guys. But then after that, like, there's no times, and no one's been able to figure it out. So the original guy, the first guy across the finish line was this guy, Frederick Loers, who crossed the finish line in first, and then it was later discovered that he had like hitched a ride to the finish line after dropping out after 9 miles. So he got banned and also, obviously disqualified. His ban actually like didn't even last like a full year, because in the next year he goes on and wins like the Boston Marathon. So kind of wacky. The winning time of that year's race was 3:28:53, slowest winning time for an Olympic marathon in history. So yeah, I mean, it'd be funny if they decide to reenact that course. It's highly unlikely because I'm sure the city layout has changed massively. I texted a friend of mine from St. Louis and I said, what do you think about this? And he said, like, I'd be interested to see what the course ends up being, but it would be very challenging. So we might be looking at something a little bit more like, I don't know how hilly St. Louis can be, but Atlanta was very challenging for the runners there. So never been to St. Louis, so this could be a fun time, first time.
Yeah, obviously we want to see, like, it's good to see someone bidding for the Olympic marathon trials. I think we were obviously a bit nervous because it's 2028. I guess we were less nervous, but when it comes to future years, it's one of those things that, because of the financial undertaking, is a bit tricky. I mean, I do wonder, why not just have it in LA, because of the advantage it would provide to the US marathon team for having run that course, competed on that course, in kind of a tough race. But then again, maybe that's,
I think that city's just going to be doing way too much at that point. Like, that's the thing, right? The rumors that like the trials may not be held at the Coliseum because it won't be ready in time to be flipped into, a track venue before the Olympics. Like, that's so like like my presumption is we'll be in Eugene for the 2028 U.S. Olympic trials, as we have been for the last 4 or 5 editions of the trials, and then the big thing will be in LA. So, yeah. All right, we'll come back to marathon trials because we're gonna take a stab at our way too early 2028 U.S. Olympic marathon team, just based off of vibes and this past weekend. But want to touch on Valencia really quick because some fast times went down there as expected, really. I mean, Andreas Almgren kind of published his final workout or two leading into this race, and so we knew that he was crazy fit, and so he lowered the European 10K record for a second time, took 8 seconds off his own previous mark, and ran 26:45 for the win. On the women's side, Eilish McColgan, I guess there's some stipulations to this one too with like the European record. So shall
I explain this one?
Yeah. But the verbiage used by World Athletics in their post is reclaims her 10K European record in 30 minutes and 8 seconds. So, Preet, explain what's going on with the women's 10K European record.
So the weird thing is, the women's 10K record, European record in a mixed race, was set by Paula Radcliffe and is 30:22. However, in 2022, Eilish McColgan ran 30:19 in a women-only race. So that mark, I suppose, holds both records because obviously you're meant to get an advantage out of being in a mixed race. So the women-only record is kind of tougher. Also the absolute record, in that case. And obviously then last week, Jana van Lent of Belgium broke that record and ran 30:10. So she broke the mixed race European record. So obviously, but Eilish McColgan still had the women only 10K record. And now she's got both records back again. So she has now run 30:08 and she now has 30:08 for the mixed race record and 30:19 for the women only record, rather than it being the same mark. But yes, that's where we are. But I think it's worth kind of saying, look, Eilish McColgan ran 30 flat on the track for 10K back in 2023. It was in the same race where Alicia Monson set the American record of 30:03. And she then, shortly after that, she ran a crazy fast half marathon, which I think was also a British, I don't think it's a European record, but definitely a British record, like 65-minute half marathon. And she then got injured in that race and had to have knee surgery. And that delayed her marathon debut. She has been struggling to get back to that shape ever since. And now it looks like she's finally back at the shape she was in back in 2023 when she was kind of, running these crazy times all over the place. So I think that's exciting. She won the Commonwealth title, 10K title in 2022. And we've now got another home Commonwealth Games as well this year. So she's probably going to be going for that on the track, even though she's not sure whether she wants to go back to the track. But she's going to try. She's going to have a think about that. And then obviously, but she is running a marathon. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's London Marathon, but I don't know.
Kind of weird that like everything you saw on social media would make you think that Eilish won this race because there was just so much fanfare about it and it was being celebrated pretty widely. But and yes, I mean like European record, major kudos, but also like she was 8th in this race, and I think that the winner also deserves a little bit of recognition. It was Brenda Jepchirchir, who ran at Auburn. I didn't even realize that. She ran 29.
This is bizarre.
29:25 is what her winning time was. Lakina Amibaugh was in second in 29:29. Claire Ndiwa, third place, 29:49. But every single time I'm like pulling up a picture and Googling who Brenda Jepchirchir is, like I see her in an Auburn uniform. And she was competing at the NCAAs back in June. And she was, Not
She was
great.
14th.
She was 21st in that race in the 5K and ran 16:01. So like,
Yeah.
how did she pop off a 29?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So her, she in June 2020. So her track PB in the 10,000 meters is the NCAA championships last year in June, where she ran 32:41. That is her track PB. She's run. I think that is maybe one of only a couple of 10Ks she's run on the track. And then she went and last year on the roads, she ran a succession of 10Ks. In September, she ran 31:50. In October, she ran 31:10. In November, she ran 30:04. And now, a couple of months later, she's gone and run 29:25. So she's been literally lopping 40, 50 seconds off her PB each time she runs a road 10K over the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess like the head scratching part is how is she so bad at the NCAAs?
Yeah, as I say, like her 5K PB is still 15:33 from NCAAs.
Crazy.
Well, from the heats of NCAAs, I think.
Yeah,
or from the East.
This doesn't really. I mean, it just doesn't line up for me. Like to run.
Yeah, I mean,
15:33 at the East Regional, and then a couple months later you run 30:04 in Lille, and then this performance. Wild.
Yeah.
20 years old, according to this database that I'm looking at. Yeah, she's never represented Kenya internationally. I guess just like keep an eye out on this name because that's a hell of a run.
Yeah, no, a bit of a breakout over 10K over the last few months. To put it mildly.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to note from Valencia?
Valencia, I mean, obviously a few good, there was a British record, there was a number of other national records behind. Let me just...
Oh, you know who I want to highlight? Because I'm a fan of this kid. Magnus Meyer. Like, I'm probably mispronouncing his last name. Or it's Myhre. That sounds like Meyer, right?
Yep.
So the reason like I'm familiar with who this kid is because he's constantly in Jakob Ingebrigtsen's YouTube videos. He's a young kid sponsored by Puma, and just this past weekend he ran 27:22 in that race. And then just a couple weeks back, he also I think ran the Norwegian national record in the 5K on the roads.
On the roads, yeah. Well, it's good to see more Norwegians. I think there were a couple of others in this race as well. Azadine Habs was in this race.
Oh, what did he run?
He ran 27:43, so not bad.
Solid.
He's qualified for the 10K Europeans if he wants to run it. There were a lot of guys out there chasing 10K qualifiers for Europeans, which is I think the time was 27:50, and there was 29 guys under that. Obviously not all European, but so this was kind of a big opportunity to run that time. On the women's side, the unfortunate thing is
Hold on one
UK.
sec. Magnus Meyer's not as young as I thought he was. He just has a baby face and he looks really, really young. I just looked it up. He's 25. Because I was like, these national records that he's getting, like Norwegian national records. I was like, I feel like Jakob would have all of these at this point, but I guess Jakob hasn't really taken to the roads as much here, and so he's able to snag them now before they ultimately go.
Yes, yeah, indeed. Isaac Kimeli was in this race. Was it bronze medalist in the 5K? Silver medalist in the 5K. 27:29. He ran. So nothing like outrageous, I think, from any of those guys. Andreas Almgren was really the standout. And there's only one other guy, Korir Bajiga of Ethiopia, who broke 27 minutes, ran 26:51. But yeah, on the women's side, where was it? What was I going to say? There were, as I say, there were a whole bunch of Brits who ran really well. Alex Bell, who was an 800-meter Olympic finalist in Tokyo, ran 30:57. She's taken really well to the roads. But the only unfortunate thing is UK athletics do not count a mixed race for 10K qualifying.
Of course they don't.
So Yes. So I'm not sure these ladies have run their qualifying time, sadly, and they'll probably have to go elsewhere to run the time.
There's always
So
something with UK athletics. It's funny enough, as we were talking, I just got the email press release from the IOC about individual neutral athletes with Belarusian and Russian passports who have been confirmed as eligible and invited to compete at the Milano Cortina 2026 Winter Olympic Games. And so it looks like they've got two Russian figure skaters, one Belarusian figure skater, two people on short track, and then one person in ski mountaineering. So there you go, Preet. I didn't know you were such a figure skating fan.
Yeah, no, I think it was again like during COVID, as in I went down the track rabbit hole, and I kind of not as far down the figure skating rabbit hole, but I do enjoy watching it.
All right, the next topic that we wanted to get to was actually we got one more news story before we go to the 28 way too early predictions, and that is this was kind of I think an expected one. Marvin Bracy-Williams has signed on to join the Enhanced Games. He's currently serving a 45-month suspension from USADA, and this felt inevitable. I kind of think that maybe he won't be appealing as hard when it comes to serving out this suspension. But he hasn't competed on the track since September 2023. He does have a PB of 985. And with his addition to the Enhanced Games, now that's 2/3 of the 100-meter Olympic podium. 100-meter podium from the 2022 World Championships, where the U.S. swept gold, silver, bronze. And you will not be seeing Trayvon Bromell move over to the Enhanced Games. He already put out his schedule on his Instagram page, and so he's got, I think, like a meet at Texas Tech, and then New Balance Indoor Grand Prix, World U.S. Indoor Championships, and then I presume if he qualifies from then on, the World Indoor Championships. So good on Trayvon Bromell for not taking the money from the Enhanced Games, and of course he wouldn't. Just kind of having gotten to know Trey over the last couple of years. The funnier part to this is just sort of the rest of the athletes that were announced that have signed to the Enhanced Games. And when I saw this, I lit up because my bold prediction on the pod about no one breaking 10 seconds in this race, it looks like it's going to hold up, because all I have to be worried about is that Marvin Bracy-Williams dusts off the cobwebs and is somehow able to go sub 10 in this race that is set for May in Las Vegas. And maybe Fred Curley also gets it together and can give it a scare. But I just kind of remember, like, Fred didn't even break 10 in his one or two outings last season around April and May. So I have no idea what's being done differently. And as of right now, again, no one's tested positive for anything. So they technically still are eligible to participate in World Athletics sanctioned events and USATF sanctioned events. At some point, maybe the juicing starts. I guess I have no idea how the behind the scenes of the Enhanced Games is going to work. Probably ends up being some sort of Netflix documentary for all I know. So the other people that were announced, you got Taylor Anderson, who you're like, who? 31-year-old sprinter, female sprinter, who is a personal best of 11:20 for 100 meters, never made a U.S. outdoor 100-meter final, and we're expected to think that she's going to give FloJo's world record a scare? Come on. Then we got Reese Prescott, 2022 4x100 world bronze medalist, who has not broken 10 seconds in a wind legal race since June 2023. His only career world championship final appearance was in 2017, and he finished 7th in that one. And then the other note is that he was once voted off of the British 4x1 relay team. Do you want to tell the story? What's the story behind this one?
I think basically he didn't turn up to a practice and they voted him off. That was for the Tokyo Olympics, I believe, and then obviously the team promptly went on to win the silver medal and then get disqualified because one of the team members, CJ Uja, had taken a banned supplement ordered off Amazon during COVID, and got caught apparently. So
then,
more, yeah, and then they lost the silver medal. So.
And then Reese Prescott made some sort of comment defending him or something like that, and Richard Kilty just like
went off on him. Yeah, so Reese Prescott is one of those people who's had a lot of talent, and he's, and people have kind of, I think he's openly admitted it. He struggled a lot with motivation, and I think the famous quote that he gave was that he nearly lost out to Call of Duty and Deliveroo, which basically Deliveroo is the equivalent of like Uber Eats over here, and he's basically someone who did lack motivation and discipline for a while, and so some of his best years, he didn't really show his talent, because as I say, he made that World Championship final in 2017, and he was still running sub 10 a couple of years ago, but obviously the hope was that he would spring on from that, and I think that's where he kind of struggled a little bit in the middle there.
This is like just speculation. When there was like all this stuff about the Rodchenkov Act and like the guy who supplied drugs to Blessing Okabare, the Eric Lira guy, there's one guy I think who's been prosecuted by the Rodchenkov Act. And then there were like these documents, and it described a British sprinter being involved. And like, does Reese Prescott fit sort of like the descriptions in some of that stuff?
I don't believe it was him. He did announce his retirement at the end of 2024, which obviously
he's 29 years old.
Yeah. But I think again, like he's someone who has, as I say, struggled with motivation. So I think it's probably that. But then obviously the money's got him back out, because he kind of realised that having a career after a sprinting career is not as easy as he hoped, and so this was a good opportunity to take the money. But
actually, the rumor that I'd heard, and I forgot when I was talking about this in our bold predictions episode, when it comes to like their recruiting, they are struggling to get women to commit to this event. But the rumor is that it's a base contract of $100,000 to just sign up for this thing, and that's before even the prize money that you have from winning at the enhanced games, and then the ridiculous bonuses that they won't hit for breaking these records. But $100,000 is clearly still not enough for certain people to throw their careers away or their reputation away. But so far they've got 2 women who have been recruited. The other one was, I think, someone who once competed at like U.S. indoors in the 60 or something like that. Other people who were named today: Clarence Munyai from South Africa. I was like, at first, like, oh, they got a 19.6 guy in the 200, and then I realized I was like, oh, he's one of those guys who like just runs really fast in South Africa and has all these altitude-aided times. Because if you look at his actual times, he hasn't run faster than 10.3 for the 100 or 20 flat for the 200 when it's not aided by wind or altitude. Then this is Jamaica Shakoria Wallace. 100-meter personal best of 11:09 from 2022, has never made a Jamaican national team for a global championship. I mean, that's very difficult in those events when you've got Sharika, Shellyanne, Elaine, the Clayton twins. So, all right, like maybe you get a pass from that. But the only time she's ever even reached the 100-meter finals at a Jamaican championships was one time in 2023, and then she was dead last in the field. So they haven't even been able to get a quality Jamaican sprinter in this one. And then the worst person of all that they signed was this Mike Bryan guy from Germany. Has never broken 10.3 didn't break 10.3 for the 100 last year. His season's best in the 60 is 6.77, which I went and I was like, all right, I'm curious, where does that put him on the world list for last year? You scroll, I think, like the 10 pages that World Athletics has available, and he's like, it doesn't even come close. Like, he's not even on there. So I was like, okay, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Where does this put him on the NCAA list? The NCAA list on TFRS goes like 50 deep, and like still not even good enough to make that. So washed. He's 33 years old, wouldn't even be competitive at the NCAA level, and somehow we're supposed to think that these are going to be the athletes that are going to run something crazy, you're going to have to really juice them up to get anything close, I think. But yeah, I mean, as of right now, this is, I mean, to just a normal person, like they did put out like a press release and they obviously like nitpick at all of their career highlights, but so that's like tried to make it appeal to just a normal spectator, which frankly, like the marketing around the idea of the Olympics, but with steroids, is a much easier thing to conceive in your mind than having to explain the intricacies of how, for example, Grand Slam worked, right? So we're definitely not the target demo for this, but still, I think like when these athletes get trounced out onto a track in May, there's going to be just sort of like a lot of fudging when it comes to just making people believe that this thing may even come close. Because as of right now, like these fields are a joke.
I mean, all I want to say is, I do think like we might be kind of falling for it a little bit. We just spent 10 minutes talking about it. And you know what? That's almost what they want us to do, right? And it's almost, should we just be ignoring it completely? Because I think, yes, obviously Marvin Bracy signing, Fred Curley signing, you know, that is kind of news. But at the same time, I think it means they are getting papers. They're getting articles in major media like outlets. They are like,
yes,
they're getting that kind of thing. And this is the thing that almost we should be avoiding. Like,
right.
We should be trying to ignore it as far as we can.
Marvin and Fred is what legitimizes, I think, it a little bit, or just like piques the interest. But what I was just trying to do here was like poke holes at the rest of the whole entire thing. There were so many factual inaccuracies in their press release as well. We won't even need to go into like all of them, but I was just kind of, for me, I guess like the point of spending that time and just like that air was to just kind of further underscore that this thing is going to be a joke, and I'm going to have the last laugh when no one breaks 10.
Fair enough.
All right, let's end this show on a
one more news story.
Oh, we did?
Albert Korir.
Oh yes. All right. So speaking of dopers, well, the enhanced games should add a marathon out there.
Loads of contenders there.
Yeah, I mean, you could track Ruth Chepengedich. You have her for 2 years, and then you've also got now a former New York City Marathon champion, Albert Korir, 2021 New York City Marathon champion, test positive for Sara, which I believe is a artificial version of like EPO.
Yes, it's a synthetic EPO, but it is like a slow release or something.
This is what Rashid Ramsey got busted for back in 2008, right?
Correct, yes. So for those who don't know, yeah, Rashid Ramsey won the 2008 Olympics in the 1500 meters in Beijing, was subsequently found a year or so later to have doped. And
Asbel Kiprop
was upgraded to the gold medal.
And then later on, Asbel Kiprop test positive for EPO.
Yeah, it wasn't a good couple of Olympics for the 1500 meters, was it? 2008 or 2012, let's be honest.
Yeah, don't. I mean, poor Nick Willis. Like he was front and center in those races and so close to the gold medals there. So yeah, it's Albert Korir. This is an interesting one because I guess like nothing ever really, jumped out to me seeing this guy race that he would be someone on EPO, because none of his times were like ever all that crazy. He would always only turn up for marathons. He's run, I think, like 20 marathons in his career, and he's been on the podium so many times. I went and tweeted his whole marathon resume basically. And the big one for sure is the fact that he won the New York City Marathon in 2022, right? I believe, or 2021. In 2:08. His PB is 2:06 from the 2023 New York City Marathon, where he was second. He's been in the top 5 at the Boston Marathon twice, and he's been top on the podium of the New York City Marathon 5 times. So he's collected quite a bit of a payday at the majors. And then last year, he won the Ottawa Marathon in 2:08:22, just ahead of Rory Linkletter. So then I guess, like, when this news came out this morning, people are like, okay, so he got popped in one of two places, because that's the only two places that he competed at was Ottawa and then in New York when he was third in 2:08:57. So the Ottawa Marathon organizers came out with their own statement this morning and shared that actually, like, Albert Korir was drug tested at their race because he had won. And, a couple weeks later, they get a notification from the Athletics Integrity Unit that says, yeah, I mean, the drug test that we took at your race came back clear. So that's usually the sign for these races to go out and dish out their prize money. This is a lesson that was learned, in the early 2010s when we had the likes of Lilia Shobakova, the Russian the Russian marathoner, walk away with some pretty big paydays from the Chicago and London marathons, and then the World Marathon Major Series. And then later on, we had the Rita Jeptu case and the money that she collected in Boston. So as a result of, these big doping cases with athletes like that, the races have put in, I think, a bit more protection and precautions around how they pay out the athletes. And so it wasn't in Ottawa. So now it was an out-of-competition test that took place, maybe last spring, summer, fall, or it was a post-competition or pre-competition test that was taken in New York City or something after that. So if he did test positive in New York in a test that came immediately after that race, then what it did was it denied Pat Deaver of a podium spot. So that's sort of like what we're waiting for now. So as of right now, he's been provisionally suspended. So when in a couple weeks or days, whenever the AIU takes the next step and officially sanctions him, we'll learn just how long the suspension will be for and when it starts and if he'll lose any results as a consequence of this.
Yeah, obviously big news in the marathon world. And I think it's always tricky to kind of think how do you think about these? Because, like you say, like every time someone gets popped for doping, you're like, especially, people are saying, people from Kenya, look, oh, it's another Kenyan, what, and I think the bit that's often tricky is, like, some people are obviously on the bandwagon of, are there any clean Kenyans? And there's some people who are saying, look, we can only hope that they are catching people, and that's good news because hopefully the majority of other people are clean. And it's really, we just, to be honest, we really don't know the answer to that. And we just very much hope, we have to have some faith in the sport that they are being more successful at catching people who are cheating. They're improving doping education so that people don't take things unintentionally or just because a coach or someone gives it to them. And, hopefully that cleans up the sport. But as I say, I suspect we're still going to see doping positives, and there's not a huge amount we can do about that. But we just hope that is, in service of making the sport cleaner. And it is unfortunate when someone as relatively high profile as Albert Korir gets popped. And it does impact, obviously, people's races and prize money and all sorts of things that can be pretty major.
Yeah. So what I would recommend for people to go and listen to, this was, I think, one of their last episodes of 2025, is there was a really good interview with the AIU head, Brett Clothier, on the Real Science of Sport podcast that Professor Ross Tucker does. Love that show. And in particular, when they interviewed him, they had asked him about just sort of like the Kenyan doping and also clearing it up for people and making this distinction that, like, a state-sponsored operation like Russia is very, very different than what's going on in Kenya, where you have just so many people who go rogue and are willing to throw it all away to get a payday that will ultimately change their lives. But the big changes that I think, like what the AIU had said, was that, quote, the testing in Kenya is better than anywhere else in the world. And that's probably also why, like, they're getting so many people to test positive. Is the big thing is that when they had all this money that was put forward by the AIU, by the Kenyan government, they're able to set up a lab in Eldoret, I believe it is, where it's at, where they're able to do testing, like test samples there. And so they expand their testing pool, and then from there you're able to turn out results quicker. And so it looks like, I think when they described it, it said, because I also pulled some of this research for this part of my book, where it's the Hall of Shame chapter, I think, that I've been working on, and it dives into the doping crisis just in the marathon. And it more than 140 athletes, Kenyan athletes, make up the 400 plus sanctioned athletes by the AIU since they came into the sport in 2017, and roughly 25% of all the testing in track and field occurs in Kenya. So that's why, sort of like, when part of the reason why people are like, why are there so many Kenyans who test positive? Like, that's part of the reason why, is because, like, they make up a big portion of the testing pool, because they also make up a big portion of who's really good in the events that they're targeting. So it is a little bit complex for just like people to kind of grasp sometimes, where it's when you see this news pop up, like, a lot of people are emotionally charged, and they're just like, yeah, ban the whole country, and lifetime ban for this athlete. And it's like, it's a little bit more convoluted than that, and it just, it's very different. And so at least it's clear that the AIU is working to catch people cheating in the sport. But yeah, I mean, with all those podium finishes that he put together, your next thought is, like, how much was taken from clean athletes along the way? Sure, maybe you could think at some point there was a turning point, and maybe he was successful before he started doping, and then something happened. And he's like, all right, I'm going to join the dark side. And when was that? We don't know. Will we ever know? Probably not. But if you add up, like, how much he won at all of these different races, it probably is a pretty big chunk of money. So it's a shame, because he was also like a very fascinating athlete to watch in these races, because going into a New York or Boston, people really weren't talking a whole lot about him. You'd always gravitate towards we got Evans Chibet in this race, or we got who's Cisse Lemma, or John Korir, one of these big names. But somehow Albert Korir would find his way to the podium in New York every single time. And so, yeah, it's a real shame for the marathoning world. But yeah, another year starts off, and we're back to our regular routine of getting a notification from the AIU that yet another Kenyan athlete has tested positive. It's a darn shame. All right. That does it, I think, for the news stories of the week. And we figured we'd play a game where we share our way too early 2028 U.S. Olympic team for L.A. We don't know where the trials will be, so we don't know how challenging the course may be. But instead of, like, I guess, like, it would be bold to pick 3, right? But at least talking about who we think would probably be the contenders at that point. So if we start off with just sort of like the basics of who was on the team, we'll go men's first. Who was on the team in 2024? It was Connor Mantz, Clayton Young, and Leonard Korir. Now, of those 3, I think we drop Leonard Korir from the contenders list for 2028. He's just going to be much older, although it was like the day or so after the 24 trials that like Elkanah Kibet was just like, yeah, I'm going to be back for 2028. And it's like, okay. I don't know if we have the next Abdi Abdurrahman with Leonard Korir, or Elkanah Kubat. So if we continue to go off of the what have you done lately, then you've got American record holder Connor Mance in there, and Clayton Young has kind of slotted himself at the second best in the last 2 years in the marathon. Now, the caveat with both of those guys is the timing of the trials. I think according to like the document for the cities that were bidding for the trials, the marathon trials will be, I think, in March 2028. The selection race will be around that time. So we just need a healthy stretch from Connor and Clayton in the fall and winter of 2027 into 2028 so that they show up in good shape for this and can try and make a second consecutive team. So those are the two favorites. Then let's throw in Zouhair Talbi, who yesterday ran 2:05:45. He will be eligible to compete for the United States in LA. And then from there, as we think of who else may be in contention, I'm going to go with some track stars, actually. After seeing, or actually, let's go Wesley Kiptoo, who had a great showing at the World Cross Country Championships as the U.S.'s number 2 guy. He ran 2:08, I believe it was, or 2:07 in Chicago last fall. And I mean, with that run at the cross country championships, he was throwing himself into the mix, leading the race at one point and hanging tough with some pretty good guys. So throw him into the mix as well. If I'm thinking of people from the track who could attempt a marathon by then my next thought goes Graham Blanks, who has floated the idea, I think. Maybe it was even on one of the interviews that we've done with him from New Balance Indoor Nationals or something like that from when he's around as a pro. But the schedule does allow for a 10K marathon double, something that Galen Rupp did in Rio in 2016. So it could be enticing for Graham Blanks, and the other person I'll throw out there for it would be Grant Fisher, who talked about this, I think, in some podcast that he did with a running influencer that I caught last week. And he said that, the goal for him is Olympic gold, as it is for anyone who considers the sport their profession. And if it's in the marathon, then that'd be epic. And we'll see just sort of like where he fits into, where he's at in terms of just sort of even his track prowess at that point, because I guess the tide turns so quick. Yes, Nico Young and Graham Blanks are really, really good. They're right on his heels, and I think there were times where they looked better than Grant. And this is just a year after he'd claimed the Olympic bronze medal. And then we see a phenomenal run by Parker Wolf to be the top guy, over the cross country 10K this past weekend. And you start to think, is Parker Wolf going to be a 10K runner by 2028? So then what does that mean for the picture with Grant, Graham, Nico? It's getting it the 10K gets a bit crowded. So will Grant move up to the marathon by then? And then from there, I'll go Alex Mayer, especially after this half marathon performance. He was the second fastest American on a record eligible course in 2025 with his 2:08 win in Dusseldorf. So those are the guys I think that I've got my eyes on right now, as the core. I don't even know what I rattled off, 6 or 7 guys as the top contenders for 2028. Would you add anyone else to the mix?
Yeah. I think we should definitely be adding Casey Klinger.
Yeah, true.
Charles Hicks, I think, who ran really well on his debut in New York just now. I mean, if Joe Klecker figures out the marathon by then, we know how good a runner he is. You've then got Hampton Samuel, obviously, who will probably be an American citizen by then. So, Hillary Bohr obviously is on the older side, but we just know how good he is, right? In terms of these sorts of, in terms of these half marathons and stuff, he keeps showing up and he keeps running quick. So I think he's going to be someone who could be up there in the marathon. Paul Chelimo's still around, but again, we see slightly older. But I think we've seen like that necessarily doesn't necessarily stop you in a marathon. And Woody Kincaid is another one who I'm sure we will be seeing his debut over a marathon at some point soon-ish. Although I'm not sure he's the kind of guy to be, patiently running a quick pace. He's always the one who wants to hang around and then kick, right? So, but then, it could be a tactical marathon, so it might be up his street.
Should we pick 3?
We can pick 3 each, yeah. See how we go. Write it down.
Yeah.
And
as of January 12th, 2026, I'm going to go. My top 3 will be Connor Mantz for the win, Alex Mayer in second, and I think I'm going to be boring and pick Clayton Young for third. Oh, actually, no. Oh, Clayton Young and his wife just sent me a Christmas card, so I kind of felt compelled to do that. But I'm actually going to go Graham Blanks as my third.
Okay, my picks are going to be. I'm just going to, partly for the sake of being different.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go Zouhair Talbi. I'm going to go Charles Hicks. And I'm going to go Hampton Samuel.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about him. Jeez. Oh, man. Could you imagine just like, because this could be a real team if it's Hampton Samuel, Zouhair Talbi, and then Wesley Kiptoo as your top 3. Like, we'd have just the MAGA crowd going crazy over those results. Like that, and it's a shame because all those guys are really good guys, and obviously, are very, very much passionate about representing the United States if they've decided to make this switch. But you feel for those guys. It's funny because like I've been deep in writing. I was writing about Meb for part of my book, and so much of 2009 for him, and even in the lead up, everyone forgets because of 2014 Boston how joyous that moment was, and the comeback for for Boston and the United States after a tragedy in 2013. But Meb faced a lot of backlash over not being American enough, even after winning New York in 2009, or the silver medal that he got in 2004. And so I feel like where we are as a country, like we would get some of that if that ends up being our team. So yeah, so I said I picked 3 white guys, but Hampton Samuel's kind of changing my mind. Jeez, we're already thinking this is going to be a bloodbath. Actually, let's make it fun for the Spotify comments section. If you're listening to this on Spotify, that's the question of the week. Give us your way too early 2028 U.S. Olympic men's and women's marathon team in the comments section, because there's just, like we said, so many different options. We both decided not to pick Grant Fisher if he made the move to the marathon. Wild.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I suspect he'll be very, very good as well. So yeah, as I say, it's going to be a tough. It's going to be a tough choice for these athletes. But I suppose someone like a Grant Fisher, if he doesn't make, he could go for the marathon team. If he doesn't make it, he still could go for the 10K team, right? Whilst some of these other
that's
athletes
the thing.
Will be putting all their eggs in the marathon basket.
That's my thinking. Is that like if you do have the interest in it, then someone like Graham Blanks, like it doesn't hurt you to do the marathon trials in 2028 to give yourself a shot to make that team, and then try and bounce back to make the 10K team. So now the biggest caveat with all of this is that we're suspecting that these guys are going to have the standard of the ranking to be able to make it into LA, because we saw what a mess that was with Leonard Korir. I would presume that 204.43 is under a standard, but 208.33, which is what Alex Mayer ran, is not. Wouldn't be. So people are going to have to start to strategize, presumably in 2027, about how they're going to be able to improve their world ranking in the marathon. if they're not able to run what was the standard for Tokyo? 206?
206.30, I think, for the men. Yeah.
Which, like, there aren't very many American men who have done that. Like Matt Rickman. He was someone who ran sub 207, I think, last year. We didn't even talk about him. So, yeah, it's
Tia Simbassa as well ran 206 last year, but yeah.
That will be it's not too early. Maybe that's a saying, and you can get that printed on a t-shirt. It's not too early to get excited about the 2028 US Olympic Marathon Trials, because this is going to be a lot of fun. So if we give the same love to the women's side, in 2025, the fastest American woman was Jess McClain in Boston, where she ran, I think it was like 2:22, 20 or something like that. I'm only looking at the World Athletics record eligible list, but I just do know that Jess McClain ran fast in Boston. Fiona O'Keefe was second fastest with her 2:22 American course record in New York. Erica Camp 2:22 in Houston. Natasha Rogers 2:23. And then your members of the 2024 Olympic team, Dakota Popane, Emily Sisson, were your fifth and sixth fastest. I mean, this one is just another one where it's like there's a good chance that the top, like the 2/3 of the American team haven't even run a marathon yet. Because like my thinking here is Wayne Kaladi will make her marathon debut this year, kind of like the worst kept secret. She was recruited to watch the race from the front of the New York City Marathon. I would think that she debuts in New York. But if people were paying a close eye on things this past weekend, they would have noticed that Wayne was wearing a different pair of shoes and spikes, I think, in her race. And I believe with contracts and all that stuff, my presumption is that Wayne is now running for a different sponsor. We'll see for sure probably when she's in the pro kit in Barcelona. So, I mean, that could change things if Wayne ends up running Chicago, which is a fast course. So I think Wayne is made for the marathon. Again, over the last couple of years, Coach Stephen Haas has been pretty methodical in her progression and development to try and follow a similar path to Sharon Lokedi. So not a bad person's footsteps to follow. So I would think Wayne will be good at it. And then from there, Fiona O'Keefe, if she can stay healthy, like she's put a gap between her and the next best American marathoners in the two marathons that she's done. If it's a flat, fast course, which I don't know if St. Louis or whatever other city ends up getting this provides, then I wouldn't put it past Emily Sisson, although, like, you know, at that point, 2028 might be quite a bit of marathons on her legs. My other thinking is going to be, where's Taylor Roe at in her career by then? And we talked about, how good she was in the half. Is this, part of Coach Alistair Craig and Amy Craig's plan to have her potentially ready to run the marathon by 2028? So it didn't work out for them to have Natasha Rogers debut at the trials. It did with Fiona O'Keefe. So I wonder what their plan ends up being with Taylor Roe's development and ultimately moving up to the marathon. This past year, Susanna Sullivan had that great showing at the World Championships. Emma Bates, you just always never know. She was the top American in Valencia of the two big professionals who ran there, her and Kira D'Amato. And then Dakota Popane is every time you talk to her before a race, like she's pretty intent on the fact that she thinks that she's got something way faster than 224 in her legs. So it's another interesting one. Who else am I missing? Just sort of in your thoughts on 2028.
Yeah, I mean, obviously all these ladies are in there. I think obviously the likes of a Betsy Sainer and someone who we were talking about quite a lot coming into the 2024 Olympic trials. I think Edna Kurgat will probably debut in the marathon by then. And given how well she ran this weekend, I wouldn't be surprised if she's a bit of a force. Yeah, and I think given the model that Taylor Roe, like I think Taylor Roe will probably debut in the marathon this year. I'd be surprised if she. I wouldn't be surprised if she debuts in the fall. But I wouldn't be surprised if other people start following that model, which kind of means we might get some others from sort of NCAA 10K kind of level, kind of graduating straight into the sort of half marathon kind of scene, because that 10K scene is just so tough. And if you don't have sort of the natural foot speed for the 5K, 5K kind of thing, then I wouldn't be surprised if we see more people doing that.
Only problem with that, Preet, is that the NCAA women's 5K distance scene right now is pretty dominated by the Africans.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So I think you're going to get these athletes who are, the best American athletes in the NCAA at that distance, on that distance scene, are going to be the ones who may decide to skip out on, having a track career post college. The likes of a Taylor Roe went straight to the 10K and the half marathon, and I see more and more people doing that. Obviously, Casey Klinger pointing, as well on the men's side. I think there's just more and more athletes who are kind of going down that route. Charles Hicks has gone down that route.
Yeah, on the women's side, it's like Emily Venters.
Yeah, Emily Venters. So yeah, actually, to be fair, I think she could be a sneaky pick as well. We shouldn't overlook her as well.
Because her PR right now is 320 something, Preet.
320 something. Yeah, I know. Gonna have a massive improvement.
But put that on the record. As of January 12th, 2026, Preet is picking someone with a 326 marathon PB. To be fair, I mean, it's all kind of, joking, because she obviously probably would have run really much faster had she gone the full distance in Toronto just a couple weeks later. And there was so much that went wrong in Chicago that this next go around will probably be much better. But yeah, I mean, when I was looking at the 10K list from last year, Elise Cranny, I probably would think she might stay in the 5K, 10K by then if she. Depending on how the 1500 experiment works out with the M11 group, Emily Infeld, who made the 10K team, will probably be a marathoner by then. But we shall see how that goes for her. Has Emily run a half even? I think. Like, I'm trying to think. Nothing really jumps out in my head off the top of my head. So yeah, I did like your call out of Edna Kurgat, because her coach Scott Simmons, I think, put that out there on Instagram. It's like the build up to 2028 has already begun, and she finished 10th at Worlds, which was the highest finish since Shalane Flanagan 2011, and then Shalane Flanagan, of course, great marathoner. So, all right, we got to pick three, just like we did.
Yeah. Let's not forget Amanda Vestry as well.
That's right.
She should be on that list, I think.
Friend of the pod, yes. All right, we got to pick three. So,
all right, shall I go for it? Well, I'm going to go with my picks. I'm going to go with Edna Kurgat, Taylor Roe, and I am going to pick my third pick. I'm going to pick Fiona O'Keefe.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go... I'm going to go Wayne Kaladi, Taylor Roe, and I'm torn between Fiona O'Keefe or Emily Sisson. Just to keep it interesting and have a little bit of a different team than you, I'm gonna go with Emily Sisson. Still got it at that point. I don't know if the American record will still be hers by then. No one's really sniffed it yet.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I think again, it's that kind of, are you going to go and run a fast course? And you need more people going to go and run fast courses, right? I think that's the...
Well, the caveat here is, like, I need to know which course is, where the course is. Because if it's a little bit...
Not at the marathon
hilly,
trials, but yeah.
At the marathon trials, then I'm less inclined to pick Emily Sisson. And I'm more inclined to pick Fiona O'Keefe. And I think that's a totally fair thing to say. All right, there you have it. Chris and Preet's way too early 2028 U.S. Olympic trials picks. We want to hear from you guys who you got making the 2028 U.S. Olympic trials, because at this point, 2 years from now, I think the qualifying window will be closing pretty soon. They usually close it, I think, 60 to 45 days out. And if they're slated to be in March of that year, then I guess that would be around this time. So, yeah. All right, this upcoming weekend, I was trying to think if there were any big meets that were happening. I think there's a meet out in UW, but people, I think, now are going to take the time to recover from cross country and get ready for the indoor season that awaits, which will really, I think, start to heat up. With Dr. Sander Invitational, the New Balance Indoor Grand Prix, BU, I'm sure, will host a slew of different time trials, and ultimately, I think, will hit its peak at the Millrose Games on February 1st. Which, hey, I guess you noted this. We should plug. CITIUS Mag has a race.
Mag. Yes.
The CITIUS Mag Women's 1,000 meters taking place at the Millrose Games. I don't quite know entirely if that means that we are going to have to hold the finish line tape, which would I guess I did that. I did do that once in my life at New Balance Outdoor Nationals. Parker Valby and I held the finish line tape. I believe it was for the boys' mile, and we had Mac Fleet ringing the bell for the bell lap. And so if we can do either one of those things, that'd be very, very cool. But yeah, we've got a race, and I'm trying to pull up the fields now to give them a shout out. The CITIUS Mag Women's 1K will feature Sage Herta-Klecker, the 5th place finisher in the 800 at the World Championships. Sigrid Duguma, the Olympic silver medalist at 800 meters. Addie Wiley, the U.S. outdoor 1K record holder. Gemma Ricci, who's a finalist at the Tokyo Olympics in the 800 meters, and also the World Indoor Championship silver medalist from 2024 in the 800. Maggie Congdon, who was the U.S. Outdoor Championships runner-up. Notoya Goul, 3-time World Championship finalist and also the Jamaican national record holder. Gabija Galvadite from Lithuania, who is a 9-time national champion for them, and the 2023 NCAA runner-up in the 800. And that field will be chasing most of that field, or maybe Sage, Addie, and Maggie will be chasing the American record of 2:34.19 set by Jen Toomey back in 2004. And then the world record is 2:30 by Maria Matola in 1999, which Sigi Daguma could have a good shot at it. Addie Wiley could give it a go. Sage has run 2:33 for the 1K, and Addie's run 2:30. So, yeah, I mean, could be in the wheelhouse. Addie's outdoor PB is faster than the indoor world record. So, that'd be really, really cool. It's a really strong field. So everyone, be sure to tune in to the Millrose Games on NBC and catch the CITIUS Mag Women's 1K race. First time we're ever sponsoring a race.
Yeah, exciting times.
Yeah. All right. I think that does it for this week in track and field. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Again, drop in those 2028 way too early marathon picks, and we will see you next week.